the into three parts. The first part is understanding the importance of calmness in yoga. So what Patanjali has to say, how important is cultivating calmness in yoga. Then the second part of the session is about obstacles to cultivating this calmness. If we know the obstacles, we can know how to fight them, right? And then there is the third part, which is the different ways to cultivate a calm mind. So first we will start with importance of calmness in yoga. So we all know that Patanjali right in the beginning of the Yoga Sutras, he has given an understanding of what yoga actually is. So he says Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, and which essentially means yoga is the cessation of the whirlpools of the chitta. Okay, so that is a little bit of a complicated statement if we don't know what this vritti, that is the whirlpools, what that means, what the chitta means. uh, and generally, chitta is often translated as the mind to make things a little easy for us to understand. But Patanjali has used very specific terms where he has used very concise language to bring forth his what he means in certain things. So we need to understand what chitta really means. So, in order to understand this, it is important to understand the concept of antahakaran, that is part of a yoga philosophy. Antaha means internal and karan means activity. So, antahakaran essentially refers to the internal dialogue that happens in our mind in response to a situation. So, the internal dialogue that is constantly happening, that is creating, all these whirlpools and thought waves in our mind, that is a product of, what we call as the mind. There are multiple layers to the mind, multiple aspects to the mind. So in the the image, you can see that one of the aspects is buddhi. So this buddhi is essentially it is intellect or pure discrimination, pure rationalization. When you want to like it's basically 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. That kind of pure rationalization, which is not colored by any kind of prejudice, essentially. Okay, and then apart from then the other parts are ahankar. So ahankar is ego. That is where all your self identifications come in: me, mine, my possessions, culture, religion, family, all of those things, all those sanskars that we have incorporated within us, that comes into play. And there is another part which is known as manas. So manas is the blind sense mind, which is purely driven by emotions, likes, dislikes. So buddhi, when you're trying to rationalize through the buddhi, sometimes it gets hijacked by the other parts of the mind, which is the ahankar and the manas, and ultimately the rationalization starts getting distorted. And then there is a fourth part, which is the chitta. So the chitta is like an umbrella. Okay? That chitta is where your buddhi, ahankar, manas are there, and all the mental modifications, the vrittis that are created, they create a lot of noise in the chitta. Okay, so but there is a part of chitta which is beyond this noise that is created within us, and that is pure awareness or undistorted reality. So that so essentially what we want to do is we want to reach to that part of the chit where there is no noise, there is complete calmness, where you can where you have this undistorted understanding of reality. So if you remember in the last session on Friday, Dr. Adashe had mentioned detached observation. So that this is the place in the chitta where you can access this detached observation, where you are not allowing your emotions or only your rationalization to to distort your understanding of reality. Okay, so that is chitta. Now, to give you an example how the internal dialogue normally works, right? So we all know about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and everybody has, an opinion to give, correct? So if you, some of the people try to understand the situation purely from rationalization. So you might have seen so many YouTube videos which try to go into the history of the conflict, what happened, who started it, and what you will see is that even if there is pure, there is an attempt to pure rationalization, everybody has still has a different conclusion to what's happening, because sometimes issues are so complex that only even pure rationalization has its own limitations. So the buddhi also has its limitations. And then some people in the same understanding of what is happening, they bring in their own self identifications. That might be cultural identification, religious identification, or maybe some kind of geopolitical affiliation. So they think that one is right, the other is wrong, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that neither the buddhi nor the ahankar nor the manas is capable of giving us pure understanding of reality. So we have to reach that chitta, and also the reality that we want to look at as yogis, the reality of existence that we want to look at. It is so vast, it is so complex that very likely we cannot understand it purely through the buddhi, ahankar, and manas. So that is why we need to go into the chitta. After giving the whole understanding of what is yoga, Patanjali also states that what is the end result, what is the culmination of yoga. So he says tada drashtuhu swarupe vasthanam, which means that if you are able to establish this calmness in the chit, where the vrittis have subsided completely, then the seer is established in his own true nature. So then you have this undistorted sense of reality. But what happens otherwise? If you're not able to do this, then vritti sarupayam itaratra. That means you remain identified with the vrittis created by these buddhi, ahankar, manas, and these vrittis are in the chitta, and you cannot go beyond this. Okay, so that is what happens when you cannot reach the final result of yoga. So, in summary, to what is yoga, and how calmness is important in yoga. If one can, for a sufficient length of time, remain unidentified with thoughts and sensations, when one is calm, neither thinking nor unconscious, and yet fully aware. So there is a point where we are completely calm. There are no thoughts. There is, but still it's not like they're unconscious. We are conscious. We have complete awareness. Then one can access his true nature. So that is where we want to reach. And as you might have seen when you are doing your yogic practices, whether you are doing pranayam, whether you are doing asana or meditation, we do reach that part, that pure calmness. It might be for a second or a few seconds. So the idea is to increase this length of time where that access to the chitta keeps on increasing for you, and that is what is the purpose of yoga. Now, in the second part of the session, so now I'm going to talk about certain distractions to this calmness. Okay, so Patanjali initially he has mentioned also what is chitta, what is vritti, and then he explains that there are also certain obstacles to this path of yoga. He says vyadhi, त्याग, संशय, प्रमाद, आलस्य, अविरति, भ्रांति दर्शन, अलब्ध भूमिक तत्व, अनावस्थितत्वानि, ते चित्त विक्षेपास्ते अंतरायः, which means that disease, dullness, doubt, carelessness, laziness, non abstention, false perception, failing to attain the stages of perception, inability to stay in these perceptions are the distractions of the mind that are obstacles to our final end goal of yoga. If you see, these are all physical and mental obstacles, right? So for an aspiring yogi, this is the battle, that on one hand we are trying to rise above these mental and physical distractions to find that calmness within us, but on the other hand the mind and the body are so noisy, they don't allow us to get into that state of calmness. So these are the different obstacles that the mind and the body create on our path. So we'll talk about all of these obstacles a little bit. And again, like I didn't mention this, but what this means is chitta vikshep. Okay, so chitta vikshep is distractions of the chitta. So the first of the chitta vikshepes is the vyadi, and which means disease. Now, disease, it doesn't necessarily have to be a very big disease. It can be a simple cough and cold, or, even a sore throat. When we have a sore throat, if you try to meditate, you will feel that you cannot go beyond that sore throat. Your mind is constantly involved there only. So, any kind of vyagi, it doesn't allow us to rise above the body consciousness and go beyond, right? And yoga understands this, and because of that, it has given through, say, the sadhak badhak tattvas in the Hatha Yoga, or the yam niyams in the sutras. He has, we have in yoga, we have this understanding that disease can be avoided through certain practices. So in Hatha Yoga, we have Shat Karma to balance the doshas, right? Or yoga is very clear on moderation in diet. So in all ways, we have to prevent disease, any kind of disease, so that we can continue with the practice. Disease cannot be avoided, of course. Despite all our efforts, the body will find some way to distract us. Like Ramakrishna Paramahansa also, he had cancer in the last stages of his life. And all of us have certain sanskars, certain karmas, because of which we will always attract disease. So the idea is to, when we have smaller problems, try to rise above the body consciousness when you're practicing, like keep on continuing doing it in order to go beyond this vyadi. Then the second vikshet is Tyang, which is unwillingness to practice yoga. So this unwillingness to meditate is one of the biggest attacks of delusion, because you don't really know why. There is no reason why you don't want to practice, but you just don't want to practice, right? That unwillingness is there, and even I have also felt many times, especially when you start practicing. So especially if you start to say meditate, initially you will have that enthusiasm, that I'm starting out with meditation, but then suddenly you feel that I don't want to meditate at all, right? And this is a obstacle created by the mind, because the mind does not want you to become have that calmness within you. So the only way is to develop willpower. So even if you don't feel like doing your practice, still continue with it. At some point, the mind will understand that, okay, this is not working. This strategy is not working for me. So I'll not use this strategy anymore. So then you will actually start to enjoy your practice, right? Then the third is samshaya, which is developing doubts about the practice or the guru's teachings. The Bhagavad Gita says that, in the fourth chapter, it says that a doubt-filled person has neither this world nor the other world, nor the supreme happiness of God. So he's basically, a doubt-filled person is neither here nor there, and definitely it cannot access the highest pinnacle of yoga. Up to an extent, doubt is good. So there is a seed of doubt within us, which is to be used to rationalize things, right? So initially, we can rationalize whether a certain guru is genuine or teachings are good for you. But once you have found your guru, once you have found the path, then you have to come out of that, doubting habit. So if it becomes a habit, it prevents us from wholeheartedly committing to the guru's teachings. So that can be a major obstacle to our progress in yoga. The next is pramad or carelessness, right? Which is essentially not paying attention to what one is doing. So very often we have, we know that a certain meditative technique has to be done in a certain way, or asana has to be done in a certain way, or pranayam. We know all the things that we need to take care of, like asana has to be done with pure total awareness. We know that, but we still don't do that. We have carelessness in our practice. And I always say that, how much the quality of the fruits of yoga practice is directly proportional to the quality of the practice. So if we practice yoga half-heartedly, then yoga also gives us half-hearted fruits. If we practice yoga with full attention, full awareness, carefully, then yoga also makes sure that it gives all its fruits that one needs, one can get from the practice of yoga. Right? Then the next is alasya, or laziness. So it's very easy. We all know laziness is a tamasic quality. It brings a lot of inertia. There is a physical laziness. There is also mental laziness. They just this create these obstacles. it creates procrastination within ourselves. So, we might think that, I know that I'm supposed to do these practices today, but I'll not do it. I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow you think I'll do it day after tomorrow. So before you know it, you have spent probably a few weeks not doing anything, right? So again, laziness is a very common obstacle in our practice. Then we have avirati or attraction towards desires. So what is that normally when we see in yoga philosophy, we will see that there is a lot of advice that is given to us. That what you should do, what you should not do, if you want to succeed in yoga, right? So the first thing is moderation in diet is like a standard standard advice that is given, that keep your body light, don't let all your energies go into the digestion of food, you know and then there is reduction in social interaction, and also in diet also, like what to eat, what not to eat. Don't eat certain tamasic foods which will create certain negative energies. Focus on sattvic food. Then there is reduction in social interaction, like don't socialize too much, have a little bit of moderation. Brahmacharya, there is non-accumulation of material things. So all of these things, these are all advices that we have been given, which is often at odds with how the world normally operates, right? So the rest of the world is the complete opposite. We are trying to do something. It's like a battle again, like like you're trying to do something. We are going against the flow of the world. It can be very difficult, and the world will let us feel that we will get some kind of FOMO. Will Let the world will it will make us feel that we are missing out on so many things because we are not able to do it because of yoga, and you start getting attracted towards these worldly desires. So it's so what helps us is that that remembering that evil we have to reflect on the evil and transient nature of the sense pleasures. Okay, if we can reflect on that the sense pleasures, these worldly desires, they are transient in nature. They are not going to stay. They have limited power to give us joy. So that helps us in keeping focus. I had seen this, comic sometime back, which really drives home this whole understanding, right? So there is this lady who is talking to Buddha. So she has all these shopping bags, and she's saying that enlightened masters say that desirelessness is the secret of happiness. But I feel happy when my desires are fulfilled, right? So she says that when I fulfill all my desires, when I shop, when I take things that I want, then I feel happy. And without desires, I would be miserable, right? So she cannot see like why yoga masters say that desires are an obstacle. So then Buddha says that have you tried to find out why you feel happy when your desires are fulfilled? So then she says, no, I have never thought about it. I don't know why. So Buddha says that, when any desire is fulfilled, you feel no other desire for some duration. Then you are in the present moment and you feel happy. As soon as a new desire comes up, your happiness vanishes. So the actual happiness comes from that state of desirelessness. So Buddha is saying that, when there is one desire that is popping up, and you fulfill that desire, before another desire pops up, there is one sweet spot within us which has no desires at all. And the actual happiness that we are getting is from being in that sweet spot, not because you are fulfilling your desires. So this is very important to understand that it's not the desire that is giving us joy, but it is not having desires or reducing our desires which leads to ultimate joy. The next, the next is Bhranti Darshan, which means false or erroneous perceptions. Okay, so that basically means its inability to differentiate between what is right, what is wrong, and this can happen to anybody. It can happen to at any point, even in our yoga sadhana. It can happen because we are still using our buddhi, ahankar, manas, with so we are not able to understand what is right, what is wrong. And there are some examples that I've given. So the first is that when we neglect our worldly duties, thinking they're not as important as our spiritual duties. when we get on a spiritual path, because ultimately we find out, in our philosophy that evolution, like spiritual evolution, is most important for a human being. That is where our duty lies. So sometimes, we start to think that that is only important. Our worldly duties or responsibilities are not that important. So you sometimes, you neglect these duties towards other people, to the world, and you only want to practice, this spiritual practices. So that is an example of Bhranti Darshan. That is an erroneous perceptions, because it will not take you anywhere. And second is allowing our external problems to destroy our calmness. So we sometimes we give a lot of importance to certain external problems. We lose our sense of perspective, like what is important. We don't remember that, we have studied that, these problems come as teachers to us on the spiritual path. So you need to keep a sort of a barrier between your problems and your practice. And it happens to the best of us. When you have a problem, it takes such a hold of your mind. Again, the mind is hijacked by these problems and mental stresses, and you completely lose the calmness that you have created through your practice for such a long time. It's just completely lost, and then you have to start again. So that is another distraction on the path. The last two of the Chitta Vikshepes are Alabdha Bhumikatva, which means inability to attain higher stages, and Anavasthitatva, which means inability to retain the stages. So there are multiple stages to our perceptions in yoga, right? So sometimes we reach a certain point and then there is a block. You can't, well, no matter what you do, you just cannot go on to higher stages. And sometimes you reach a certain stage and then you start slipping backwards. So some maybe you have had some perceptions one day, and then maybe for a few months or years you don't reach that stage. So this is Alabdha Bhumi Tattva and Anavasti Tattva. And the reasons can be that, we have certain past sanskars which suddenly, they pull us back. There might be some karmic seeds within us which, suddenly sprout, and they create, obstacles. And these obstacles can again be the rest of the chitta vikshepes, right? And there is so much of enthusiasm that we start out, and in the process we lose out this enthusiasm, devotion that we had started out with. So that also creates this problem, alabdha bhumikatva and anavasthitatva. And when this happens, we should remember that, why we started to practice yoga, what were our previous triumphs in our practice, and just continue, let's continue, try to bring that enthusiasm and devotion back in our practice. So these are the nine distractions to, the that peace and calmness that we need in the chitta for yoga. Then in the next, after chitta vikshep, in the next verse, Patanjali gives the symptoms of chitta vikshep. So sometimes the nine chitta viksheps that I just mentioned, they or the antaryas that I mentioned, they might not be immediately visible to us, or we might not figure out that, okay, so I'm having this particular obstacle. So for that, Patanjali has given very specific symptoms. He says dukha dar manasya anga me jayatva shwasa prashwasa vikshep sahabhava. So he says that sorrow, mental distress, tremors in the body, irregular breathing are the accompanying symptoms of chitta vikshep. So these are the symptoms that a sadhak can very quickly understand. That, okay, I mean, sorrow and mental distress, no need to get into it. We all know. Like I said, like we have some problems. We feel that mental distress. The mind refuses to get out of that problem, right? And then there are tremors in the body. So again, from perspective of meditation, there are sometimes, when you sit to meditate, if you close your eyes, you try to to focus on the third eye. This is my experience. It might be your experience also, that your eyes, even right now, like, because I'm talking and my mind is constantly working. My the eyelids, they keep on moving, like they don't stay in one place, like they keep on flitting. Okay. And similarly, even the eyelashes, they keep on fluttering. So this is a very one of the ways in which there are these tremors in the body. And when this happens, I immediately understand that the mind is in overdrive. Like it's not calm at all. um, and then there is irregular breathing. So again, when the mental process is very much in overdrive, your breathing remains irregular. Your heart, and because of that, your heartbeats don't, they don't gradually, they're not able to reduce their rate. So all of these are the accompanying symptoms of chitta vikshep. So after that, it's in the third part of the talk. I'll talk about how to remove these, all these distractions in the chit, which all the all the vrittis that the never-ending whirlpool that this that is created. How can we remove that? So Patanjali has actually given multiple ways, to remove. So he says practice a one-pointedness. Then he says cultivating the correct attitude. So it's basically chitta prasadana. Then you have control of pran, observation of the sense experience. Inner elimination is probably, as far as I understand it, it is about being able to see certain light. Um, then there is detachment from matter, cultivating the knowledge of dream and sleep, and meditation. So most of these, as I see it, are more towards the meditative part side. But the one that I want to focus on is cultivating the correct attitudes or chitta prasadanam. Okay, so Chitta Prasadanam means uh, cultivating a very calm, very beautiful state of mind. And this is one of the ways, which you can practice throughout the day. It means how you can, regulate your emotions throughout the day as, you interact with your external environment. How you can learn to regulate your emotions and hence keep the chit calm. So we will focus on that. So Chitta Prasadanam is mentioned in the 33rd shlok of the Yoga Sutras. So Patanjali states that Maitri Karuna Mudito Pekshanam Sukha Dukha Punya Punya Vishayana Bhavanat Chitta Prasadanam. So which translates as when you come across happiness, cultivate friendliness. When you come across misery, cultivate compassion. When you come across virtue, cultivate joy. And when you come across vice, cultivate indifference. So we'll see all these four in a little bit of detail. So first is, when you come across happiness, cultivate friendliness. So I don't think that it necessarily means that, when you see happy people, you should be friendly towards them. But what we need to focus is on being friendly towards the happiness, right? So when you see happiness in others, instead of reacting with jealousy or the feeling of being left out, we should have we should have a feeling of we just should be happy for them, right? Like if you see somebody has succeeded, then we should be happy for them. So it's basically having a very positive state of mind when you see happiness of others. Okay, so we need to regulate our emotions. um, so we all know, we already seen in the past sessions where that about mental health issues and depression, anxiety, where social media is a very big part these days, in creating this mental distress. And I felt that when I read this sutra, I immediately thought that Patanjali has actually given us the reason. Even at that time, he has given this reason that we are not able to regulate our emotions, when we see happy social media posts, so it creates these vrittis. And of course, there are many other reasons for having all these mental problems because of social media, but this is also one way. So, especially in children, youngsters who have not been taught, that how to be aware of your emotions when you are seeing something, how to regulate them. We are not never taught this, and this is why it is creating all these mental distress within us. The second is part is when you come across misery, cultivate compassion. All right. So instead of if you see a miserable person, if you are seeing a somebody who's begging on the streets, who is not very well to do, instead of feeling that, oh, he's lazy, or you just being judgmental about him or her, or thinking that maybe he's using all his money for the wrong kind of thing. Instead of going into that kind of a judgmental attitude, it is better to cultivate compassion. The biggest example that I could think of compassion was Milarepa. So Milarepa was a Tibetan yogi, one of the best known and the most accomplished Tibetan yogis. And when he was a child, so when he was probably a teenager, he killed a lot of people. He killed a lot of his relatives through black magic, and maybe 30, 40 people, if I remember correctly. So he was a mass murderer. And after that, he realized his mistake, and he didn't know, like, how to get out of the sin of that he has done, being a mass murderer. And he started to search for, the understanding of life and guru. He started to search his guru, and he eventually found a guru. So his guru obviously could look through him. He saw that this person has done so much, but he could see his misery. He could see he's so miserable about it, and he he displayed compassion. He said he still accepted him as his disciple, and Milarepa became one of the biggest yogis. So I think for as aspiring yogis, we also should, follow the footsteps of these great masters and show compassion when, we come across misery. And the last two parts of Chitta Prasadanam is, when you come across virtue, then cultivate joy. And when you come across vice, cultivate indifference. So, what this means is that, when you see goodness, recognize it, appreciate it. Okay, so you say, for example, there is somebody and everybody will have good and bad qualities. It is best for us, for our peace of mind, to focus on the goodness of the good parts. When you see negative qualities, be indifferent. Don't give it importance. Whatever you give more energy to, whatever you give more, importance to, that also increases within us. So when we are focusing on the negative, on vice, it starts to create tamas within us. It starts to, and that also gives rise to these, this vrittis, these whirlpools that you cannot calm down easily. I was reminded of this quote by Rumi. He says that the beauty you see in me is a reflection of you. So when you see something, when you see the world as beautiful, it is because there is a beauty within you. So try to cultivate, so you can do the other way around also. So try to focus on the good, and ultimately you will help in cultivating the good within ourselves. So that is the aspect of Chitta Prasadanam, how to create a very peaceful, a very calm mind, which is helpful to our practice of yoga. So to conclude, cultivating calmness is the first requisite for success in yoga. It is a prerequisite for success in yoga. And a yogi's responsibility is first to be aware and recognize the pitfalls that disturb our calmness. When we know that our scriptures have given us all the milestones, all the pitfalls, and which will disturb our calmness. So recognize them, be aware about it, and work on them and regulate our behaviors to protect it. So that is the end of the presentation.